I used to think calm children were just born that way. Some families had them, some didn't, and the difference was temperament, genetics, the particular mood the universe was in when your child arrived. Then someone in my parenting group shared a video. A Tokyo subway train at rush hour. Seats packed, people pressed together, the kind of noise and closeness that makes most toddlers spiral. And right there in the middle of it, a little girl maybe 2.5 years old, clearly tired, snack already gone, eyes heavy. She was just sitting quietly, watching the lights flash past the window. The comments in that group were all some version of the same question. How? What I found when I started researching wasn't what I expected. No stricter discipline, no calming technique applied in the moment. Something that had already been happening for 2 years before that train ride. Something so subtle that most outside observers would miss it entirely. By the end of this, you'll understand the exact mechanism, grounded in research from Hiroshima University on how children develop social awareness. And I'll share a single bedtime practice you can start tonight. Genuinely tonight, 2 minutes, no preparation required. The Japanese have a phrase, meiwaku o kakenai. You pronounce it roughly, meiwaku o kakenai. A direct translation would be don't burden others. But that translation flattens something much richer. Meiwaku isn't just about politeness. It's a whole orientation toward the world, an understanding, held at the level of reflex rather than thought, that your presence lands on other people, and that you carry some responsibility for how it lands. This phrase is introduced to children not as a rule they're punished for breaking, but as a lens. And here's the mechanism. Japanese parents narrate it out loud, constantly, in small ordinary moments that barely register as parenting at all. A mother on a crowded bus might say, not as a correction but as a quiet observation, "The man near us looks very tired. Let's stay calm so he can rest a little." She says it the way she might point out a bird outside the window. Informational. Matter of fact. No edge to it, no warning implied. Just a moment of shared attention on someone else's inner life. Researchers at Hiroshima University, who studied prosocial development in Japanese toddlers, called this the social mirror effect. When parents repeatedly draw their young child's attention to the emotional states of people around them, they're not teaching a rule. They're training a form of attention. The child's developing brain begins to automatically register other people's states the same way it registers color or sound. By age 3, the researchers found, children raised in narration-rich environments showed measurably stronger empathy responses than control groups. Better behavior, yes, but also actual empathy encoded as reflex. The mechanism goes deeper, and this is where I think the Western parenting conversation misses the whole point. Meiwaku o kakenai is part of a much older Japanese concept called amae, the understanding fundamental to Japanese culture, that human beings are interdependent. Just a basic fact of life, something to accept rather than solve. Western parenting culture, broadly speaking, treats independence as the developmental endpoint. We celebrate the child who does it themselves. We praise autonomy. Japanese parenting tends to orient toward interdependence as the sign of maturity, knowing how your presence affects others, and choosing to move through the world with care for them. A tantrum in public, in this framing, isn't just a behavior problem. It's meiwaku, a burden placed on people who did nothing to invite it. Children absorb this framing not through being told, but through watching the adults around them model it, again and again in the texture of ordinary days. What surprised me most wasn't the philosophy itself, it's how early the absorption begins. We tend to think of empathy education as something you start around age 4 or 5, once a child has enough language to discuss feelings. But the Hiroshima data suggests the social mirror effect forms in the first year of life. The child isn't understanding words yet. They're absorbing rhythm, the tone in their parent's voice when a stranger walks past, the slight adjustment their parent makes on a crowded sidewalk, the small quiet way adults move around other people. Long before vocabulary, the pattern is already setting. This doesn't happen without friction. Several Japanese parents accounts from describe the early stage of narration practice as genuinely strange, pointing out other people's states to an infant who stares back at you completely blankly. One mother put it this way, you talk, and there's no sign they hear you. And then one day, somewhere around their 2nd birthday, they do something. They lower their voice in a library, or they touch a crying child gently on the shoulder, and you realize it was all going in. The consistency was the mechanism. Thousands of small conversations stacking invisibly. Stepping back, what this approach reveals is a shift in the question we usually start with. We ask, how do I stop my child from melting down? That question puts the child at the center as a behavior to be managed. The meiwaku approach asks something different first. What does my child understand about the people around them? A subtle shift in frame, and it leads somewhere entirely different. There's another concept worth naming, because it's the one that makes the bedtime practice work. Shitsuke, often translated as discipline, though shaping is closer, specifically, the gentle and repeated shaping of character through daily ritual. Ritual, not lectures. The bedtime practice takes 2 minutes. When your child is settled and calm, just before sleep, 2 questions. First, did anything happen today that might have been hard for someone else? Not did you do something wrong? Not were you well behaved? Just that open, curious question, offered without judgment. Second, is there anything you could do tomorrow to make something a little easier for someone? That's it. 2 questions, done. One detail that stayed with me from the research. Parents weren't only using the practice to process negative situations, they were equally likely to surface positive ones. Did you notice how grandma's face changed when you showed her your drawing? The habit is about attention itself, training the child to see that the people around them have inner lives worth noticing. A 2021 study on prosocial habit formation in early childhood found that children who practiced regular, parent-guided reflection on others' experiences showed significantly stronger cooperation and conflict resolution skills by age 5 compared to those whose moral guidance was primarily rule-based. The language of meiwaku, it turns out, doesn't need to be Japanese to work. Here's the take that'll probably get some pushback. I think most Western parenting guidance actively delays this development by waiting too long to introduce it. We assume children aren't ready to think about other people's inner lives until they're verbal, until they're old enough to understand. The evidence suggests otherwise. If the social mirror effect sets in during the first year through modeling alone, through tone, gesture, and the quiet way adults move through the world, then we have a window we're not using. A window that closes earlier than most advice acknowledges. I'm genuinely curious, at what age did you first start narrating other people's experiences to your child? Comment below. There's no right answer, but the range people give, from before they could sit up to around 5 when they started school, tells me this varies more than most parents realize. I read every comment. Meiwaku o kakenai, don't burden others. 3 words that, practiced quietly through thousands of ordinary moments, shape something in a child that no single lesson ever could. The social mirror, the 2-minute bedtime review, the narration on a crowded train that most people wouldn't even notice as parenting. None of this requires a different kind of child. It requires a different kind of attention, aimed slightly outside both of you, at the world you're moving through together. Tonight, try the 2 questions. If your child says something that surprises you, share it in the comments. Comment mirror so I can find your reply. I'll be reading through them this week. If this way of thinking resonates, the next video explores a parallel practice from Chinese parenting culture, specifically how Chinese parents handle failure in their children, and what happens developmentally when a child is allowed to struggle without rescue. The research surprised me in the same quiet way this one did. Subscribe so you're there when it goes up.